Tada Productions Incorporated has been bringing affordable, quality theater to Lincoln and surrounding areas for 20 years. During that time, it has toured shows, done regional premieres, worked directly with Broadway creators to put a national spotlight on the Midwest, collaborated with an array of groups, and even built its own space. But did you know the entire history of Tada and how it got to where it is today? Its roots go back over 30 years ago when Bob Rook met Chris Wheat at Nebraska Wesleyan University. He was a student in the theater department, and she in the music department. They met on a production of South Pacific under the direction of Henry Blanke, a show they would revisit again years later. As they began dating, the two began getting more involved in other theater as well. She would play several roles at the Lincoln Community Playhouse, including Gypsy Rose Lee in Gypsy. He would play Arnold Wiggins in The Boys Next Door at the Playhouse. They also spent their summers in several shows at Pinewood Bowl, including Annie, where she would play the role of Grace, and he the role of FDR. An array of more shows took place, and following their time at NWU, she would go on to get her master's in music from UNL and perform in the summer with the Nebraska Repertory Theater. And he began acting in commercials and film, and also toured the national stand-up comedy circuit. When Bob's grandfather, who once toured with the Toby Road Show, died, Bob and Chris decided to produce their first show with the $3,000 that was left to him in his grandfather's will. The location would be the old Joyo Theater in Havelock. The show would be by the composer they both were passionate about, Stephen Sondheim. The musical was Assassins. Vince Larned would musical direct and sing the role of the Balladeer, alongside a young actor named Steve Pearson in the role of John Hinckley, who would later become a Tada actor and board member. Over 200 people a night attended the musical. This would be the first of many shows to come for Bob and Chris. However, their grandest production was on the horizon, the birth of their daughter, Megan. After that, the two decided they wanted to do more theater in town to keep their families closer together. So the two began producing shows for their company, Coeur Entertainment, located at the 7th Street Loft. Their company was soon hired to do dinner theater in the basement of the old Gunnies building, across from UNL's Temple building, where UNL also invited Coeur Entertainment to produce the musical Godspell. They were then invited to partner with one of Gunny's co-owners to be part of a new dinner theater being built in a renovated warehouse in the Haymarket. Excitement soon turned to worry when contractors ran over budget. No matter how well the show sold, the theater could not recoup its losses. Adding to those pressures, the Rook's vision for theater was different from their partners. Bob would later write, "We were doing good shows, but they didn't always showcase our passion for the craft. Sometimes having a bigger space means bigger problems, and it made my temperament into someone I didn't want to be. As hard as it was, we knew we had to make a change." With heavy hearts, the two left the partnership. The theater closed, and they prepared for the next step in their careers, and that would mean leaving Nebraska. Then, an email would come from an unlikely source. The creators of Jekyll and Hyde the musical were looking for a theater company to do their Midwest premiere. They both knew this was the type of show they'd been longing to do, and the opportunity was too great. They agreed to do the musical. The next step was to find a location, so they rented the Rococo Theater. Following a large audition turnout, they cast many local veteran actors. Bob's friend, who was the designer at the New Rose Theater in Omaha, was hired to build the set. Everything had come together like magic, and the excitement for doing theater had returned. A new theater company was born where the arts deserve attention. Tada! Jekyll and Hyde opened for 2 performances on a Sunday and Monday night, the only 2 nights the theater would rent out. Regardless, the show was a hit, with over 800 people a night attending the musical, with actor Stephen Rich playing opposite Chris Rook in the leading roles. In the audience were the proud professors of theater, Henry and Phyllis Blanky. He commended his former students for not only doing a great show, but for building something meaningful when they could easily have given up. He went on to explain, "If you stay on this course, put your blinders on and run in the race, you'll continue to do good work, and others will be glad you did, and will want to be a part of it." He was right. The success of Jekyll and Hyde was obvious, and having some Broadway creators approve of your work didn't hurt either. This was the moment for Tada to continue on. Bob and Chris knew Tada needed to keep building its patron base, and the best way to do that was to get their product out in front of as many people as possible through collaborations. They turned again to their favorite composer, Stephen Sondheim, and with permission from the licensing agent, put together a tour of Side by Side by Sondheim that would play at the Minden Opera House, Brownville Concert Hall, Omaha's Millennium Theater, Hastings Community Theater, and places in between. During the tour, Lynn Johnson, the director of Lincoln Parks and Recreation, contacted Tada and asked if they would do the show at Pinewood Bowl to help raise funds for the renovation of the Sunken Gardens project. So that fall, the show was produced at Pinewood Bowl to rave reviews. The city offered Tada a contract to do more shows so that they could further utilize the bowl in the fall, with hopes to someday raise funds to renovate it. The next year, a much bigger production of Little Shop of Horrors took place. Followed the next year by the massive musical Beauty and the Beast that featured a huge cast led by theater veteran Cork Raymer and Tada newcomer Michael Tully as Gaston. It was a huge risk, but one that paid off as it played to some of the highest attendance records the Bowl had ever seen. The collaborations continued, including a monthly cabaret series at James Arthur Vineyards called A Taste of Wine and Broadway that would feature the top vocalists in and around Lincoln. Then the Lincoln Symphony called Tada to do 2 shows, including an original holiday production featuring tunes from Broadway, including a song from Broadway lyricist Lynn Ahrens, who had heard of Tada from the team of Jekyll and Hyde. The other LSO collaboration was a Halloween concert where Mr. Rich returned to sing songs from Hyde, as well as songs from Beauty and the Beast. And director of UNL Opera Bill Shomos joined Chris for 2 numbers from Sweeney Todd, a show they had done together in 1998 at the Old Dinner Theater. Hearing them sing Sweeney Todd, this time with an entire orchestra, Bob began working on doing the musical again, this time at UNL's Kimball Hall, with a collaboration between Tada and the Nebraska Symphony Chamber Orchestra. Chris and Bill would revisit their roles, but this time with a new directorial concept. The entire set would consist of 3 black platforms with jagged edges cut out of them that beams of red light would burst through every time the demon barber cut the throats of his victims. Bob turned to one of his friends and former scenic designers, Bob Hall, to draw etchings of London that would be projected overhead on a large screen to set the mood for every scene. The more victims Sweeney took out, the more red ink Hall would add to the drawings. The cast included UNL faculty, students, and Tada veterans. It introduced even more patrons to Tada and continued the tradition of collaborations and outreach, including 2 shows with the Lincoln Choral Artists at O'Donnell Auditorium, the productions of Big River and South Pacific. There was also a production of Quilters to help open the International Quilt and Study Center, a concert at Rodizio Grill, and several productions in partnership with the Leeds Center for Performing Arts. And in years to come, there would be several master classes with Broadway and television stars like Robert Westenberg and Kim Crosby. During the first years of operation, The Tada offices and rehearsal space were in the terminal building on O Street. The sets would be built in a garage out on Cornhusker Highway, and then trucks and vans would be loaded up to go wherever their shows were taking place. As things were beginning to take off for Tada, Henry Blanky, now retired from Wesleyan, called Bob and Chris to let them know that the theater he had created years ago, the Brownville Village Theater, may be closing. For years, the theater was Wesleyan's summer stock repertory theater. Years before, Bob himself had acted there in a production of You Can't Take It With You. But now the college was pulling up stakes from the theater that had once played consistently to 100% attendance, but had dropped to 40% in recent years. The theater was left deserted. Blanky asked if Tada would consider looking at the situation and perhaps running it for the summer. Bob recalls, "I knew the importance of the place, not only to Henry and Phyllis, but also to everyone who'd ever been there before. Had anyone else asked us, I would have said no, because I knew how much work this was going to be. But Henry was not only my teacher and mentor, he was always my best resource to turn for guidance and feedback over the years. He truly was like a father and best friend to me." That summer, when Tada moved to Brownville, it introduced more musicals to the summer audience. They recruited bus tours on their way to Branson to make Brownville a scheduled stop, and Henry and Phyllis also agreed to do one performance of Love Letters, a show they had done years before for Tada. The plan was for that performance to bring some of the alumni audiences back to Brownville, and it worked, because it sold out, and 8 performances of Love Letters were added that summer. 3 months and 7 shows done in true repertory fashion later, attendance had grown back up to 98%. At the end of the summer, Tada had restructured the theater so it would continue as an independent theater, passed it on to a new director, and then returned to Lincoln. Brownville Village Theater continued to operate into the future. "I knew that summer made Henry very happy and all of us very proud of Tada," Bob wrote. Tada was growing its patron and talent base and gaining respect in Lincoln as a quality theater company. Soon a call came to join a collective that would be building a space above the Mill Coffee House, named The Loft at the Mill. Tada agreed to join the collective and opened the space with the musical I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change. During Tada's time at the Loft, their connections with the creators of Jekyll and Hyde continued to pay off, as the creators of the New York staple Forbidden Broadway contacted Tada to see if they would like to be the first company outside of New York to do their show. They were looking to license the title in the future, but wanted to see how their spoofs on musical theater gems would play outside the Big Apple. Tada selected what numbers they would do, and the creators sent them their stellar costumes. Tada's staging and new interpretation of the show was a hit, and it put a national spotlight on the Lincoln Theatrical Company, which led to other ventures, such as the regional premiere of Gilligan's Island the Musical, and its creators coming to Nebraska. Also, composer Stephen Schwartz sending Tada a copy of his own score from a new musical at the time called Wicked, to be part of an original Tada production musical event. Tada was doing productions that were unique and growing its patron and participant base. New actors were finding a home with Tada, and seasoned veterans were coming out of retirement to take part in the productions. The city of Lincoln took note of Tada's work and awarded them the Mayor's Arts Award. Tada's efforts and connections also led them to the creators of Happy Days, a new musical, granting them permission for the regional premiere to be done by Tada. But the loft space did not have the right technical means. After all, Fonzie had to ride his motorcycle on stage. Enter the Leeds Center for Performing Arts that was becoming more and more familiar with the professional quality of Tada's productions. The lead partnered with them on Happy Days. The show was produced in the Carson Theater. This collaboration together led to more, including the musicals Chicago, Little Shop of Horrors, and Forever Plaid. With Tada's growth came the need for its own space. With help from the Community Advisory Board and at the urging of downtown businesses, Tada agreed to remain in the Haymarket. Bob recalled a recently closed restaurant in the Creamery building that had hosted a reception for Tada earlier in the season. Years before that, it was a crude performance space called the Lincoln Ensemble Theater, which Bob had been hired to direct a show for. He, along with Henry Blanky and Paul Arndt, owner of the Tool House, a pillar business in the Haymarket and Tada supporter, all walked the suite. It was an intimate space. Henry told them, "We could build a village theater here." Knowing the theaters, which sat more than 200, were having a hard time regionally with overhead budgets and filling their seats, it began to make sense to build an intimate storefront theater in Lincoln. If the runs sold out, they would extend them rather than build a bigger space and accrue the added costs that came with it. Paul would help oversee the construction and get the contractors. Henry and Bob would draft up a floor plan, and board member President Jim Gordon would negotiate the lease. The building of the Tada Theater was underway. Members of Tada volunteered to make the space a reality, from scraping the walls to wedging every quarter inch of the stage to make it flush on the 100-year-old floor. The old kitchen had enough electricity to run the stage lights, and the basement allowed for a scene shop. Tada would finally consolidate all its operations under one roof. After several months of construction, the grand opening occurred with the mayor and a ribbon cutting. The transformation was complete with a steady stage, new seats, a tech booth, even a showcase stage. The first production in the space was one Tada was familiar with, Gilligan's Island, the musical. Patrons followed Tada to their new home, and the size of the space has never limited what shows were to take place. As Henry would say, "Having more bells and whistles limits how talented of a director you can really be. You must think of new and creative ways to do the shows, but when you accomplish it, that impresses the audiences even more. A space never limits your imagination or vision of the show." Bob understood this philosophy. The Tada Theater has produced such large-scale productions as Avenue Q, Company, Fun Home, Into the Woods, Man of La Mancha, The Addams Family, and even Chess the Rock Opera with an entire orchestra, along with many more shows. The intimacy of the theater allows the audience to connect with the actors' performances on stage. When an actor raises an eyebrow or emotes a subtle musical note, patrons can be more connected to that performance than if they were far away from the stage in a larger space. With the building of the new theater, the connections and collaborations that have been the foundation of Tada continue, including the regional premieres of the Spidey Project and working on the regional premiere of the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. The show sold out its initial run and returned for a second run at Tada, which also sold out. After seeing the production, staff from the Lead Center invited Tada to partner on a large Broadway-sized version of the show. Tada was one of the first local theaters to perform on their main stage. This collaboration was later followed by producing Tony and Tina's Wedding in their newest space, the Lead Commons. With the growth of Tada and the creation of the theater, Bob and Chris decided to transition Tada into a nonprofit corporation, and the members of the Community Advisory Board officially became the Tada Board of Directors. The Tada Theater received the Impact Award for Downtown Development from the Downtown Lincoln Association. Its unique productions have included shows like A Cornhusker Christmas, a radio musical which was recorded and aired on NET Radio, and The Bard of Blood that brought the show's playwright Lloyd Schwartz to Lincoln. Schwartz's father was the creator of The Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island. Lloyd said, "Hollywood is where the best talent is supposed to be." I'm sorry that many of the people here haven't had the privilege of seeing the talent and professionalism in Lincoln at Tada. I have seldom seen a company as talented and caring about the work. At the same time, they really enjoy what they're doing as they bring the arts to the community. It is a privilege to be considered part of their company. Tada Productions celebrates its 20th year in Lincoln. Jeff Mull, executive director of the Lincoln Convention and Visitors Bureau, noted, "Tada Productions remains an outstanding asset in our community. It offers wonderful entertainment and variety for those living in Lincoln and in the state of Nebraska." Tada has included over 600 actors, many designers, countless musicians, valued sponsors, volunteers, donors, and over 6,500 patrons. It's created lifelong friendships and is a place many call their performance home. The people make Tada what it is. It offers quality, affordable theater, as well as theatrical opportunities for students, theater veterans, community members, and professional actors. Tada continues to be the little theater company that does big things, both on stage and in the community. It's the magic of Tada that has proven it's the place where the arts deserve attention.